what is it that you were looking for, and what looking in retrospective, what made you vulnerable to the organization, to the cult that you were vulnerable with, and the and how could it have been any different?
Okay, so I mean, the first thing is I really don't believe it could have been any different looking back. I think most people are in a very similar boat. I made the best decisions I could with the amount of knowledge I had, with the level of intuition that I had at the given moment, and I followed that. And I don't regret that because I think there's something really important in that. I think, and there were moments later in my journey, which I'll share about later, where I didn't follow my intuition, and I remember coming to a conclusion very distinctly in my mind, which was that I'd rather follow my intuition and be wrong than not follow my intuition. So on one level, I don't think it was avoidable. Going back in retrospect, I think almost every detail of my life was unavoidable, if I really am honest with myself. What was I looking for is very complex, is very complicated, and in a sense, I think is semi unique to my person. The only thinker that I found that I can really see went through it in his own unique way, which was different from my own, was Friedrich Nietzsche, who's one of my biggest influences. And he gives this line in the introduction or the preface of one of his books. It's called On the Genealogy of Morals, where basically what he's trying to do is go back thousands of years and show how morals evolve over time and in different cultures and civilizations. But he speaks about how he was born at such a young age. He doesn't specify what the age was, but you get the idea that it's definitely in the young teens, maybe mid teens. And he says that he had such moral sentiments and such levels of thought and influences internally inside of him that he could almost be willing to call it what's called the a priori. I don't want to go too deep into what a priori means because it can have many different definitions. But generally, what it means is that a person is born with something, and everybody is born with that something. It's not unique to just me. The question is for certain people, when they're born in a given environment, they kind of have a natural reaction to the environment where those voices and those internal things they're born with can become very loud and noisy that you just simply can't ignore them. And what is meant by that in my particular situation, I remember being 14, 15 years old, and keep in mind I was born into a secular Jewish home. But once again, just very, my father just very material driven, about money, about living in a good house and these kind of things, which I don't mean to denigrate in its entirety, but there wasn't a looking for beneath the superficial. There wasn't looking for deeper meaning and purpose and deeper answers to deeper questions about life. And yet, when I was 14, I could remember sitting on a bench. Maybe I'll remember it right now and I won't fuck it up, like to curse once in a while. Um, to know one knows nothing is to create something. To create something from nothing truly is something. Everything is something except for nothing. But if nothing is nothing, then what is nothing? And I remember sitting there being 14 years old, thinking about like the deepest mysteries of the universe, looking at the stars every night was one of my favorite activities. It still is. Although since I've been in Mexico with you, I haven't done it as much. Um, and thinking about causality, thinking about what was the first cause of the universe. Even before I met Kabbalah, when I met the Kabbalah Center, I met Kabbalah by studying Kabbalah by myself first. I didn't get introduced to the Kabbalah Center first. I found Kabbalah in books because I was seeking 14, 15. I was looking at the Quran. I was looking at psychology books. I was looking at philosophy books. I was looking for something because there was nothing around me. I grew up in a town called Boca Raton. I lived in a upper scale neighborhood with a significant amount of wealth, although that's always relative to who you're comparing it to. And there was no religion, there was no spirituality, there was no deep stuff around. So I found it in books. And I remember even before Kabbalah, I was thinking, and it's such a strange thought now, for the deeper thinkers who are tuned in, familiar with more of philosophers, I looked at myself kind of like between Schopenhauer and Nietzsche 15 to 20 years before I would know their names. And I remember looking at human beings in comparison to animals, and I was mesmerized. I remember speaking to a friend about it named Lou. If Lou ever sees this, what up, Lou? I love you, man. I miss you. Lou was a friend of mine amongst breakdancers and a very talented artist as well. And I remember speaking to him often that I was mesmerized. I would look at animals that whatever desire or urge they had, whether it be for food. I remember thinking if there's a dog in heat, a male dog in heat, which like my dog, I witnessed him do that. He's going to fuck that female dog. He's not going to think like, am I going to get her pregnant? Am I going to, like ruin my life? He's not thinking of the past, present, and future in the capacity of a human. And I was astonished by that at 14, 15. And it took me down a road which is quite dangerous. Some people might need to go through that road for themselves, because that dangerous road that I went down, which is the route of complete renunciation, which we'll get into, there might be something healthy about going through it. But there's also, I think, a lack of discussion going on in the popular discourse about how a person born with a different disposition and a different temperament, not everybody approaches religion the same way. When I found out about Judaism and Kabbalah and religion, and like we discussed the other day, Siddhartha, I didn't take it as a joke. I took it so seriously, it's not even funny. We'll talk about, there was a 7 year period of my life. I worked for free in the Kabbalah Center. But I grew up, a young teen, experimental, drugs, rapping, breakdancing, fun, creative, sexually active, having sex relatively young. And then by the time I'm turning 15, 16, 17, I decided slowly but surely, full blown by 19, to restrict those desires entirely. So no sex, no kiss, no touch, not even masturbation one time for 7 years. And food restrictions, prayer restrictions. I mean, a lot of those 7 years, some of it wasn't mandated by the Kabbalah Center. Some of it I just took over the top because I'm so extreme. Always cold, freezing showers, lots of fasting days, lots of days of no sleeping, studying hours a night, the Zohar and ancient texts. It wasn't religion for me wasn't going to church once a week or going to temple once a week. And when I say that, I don't mean to undermine or diminish those who pursue religion in that way. In fact, the irony is that might be more healthy than my approach was. Like that's the irony of it. But different temperaments and different dispositions relate to religion, or relate to love, or relate to art, or relate to anything in such different capacities. And for me, I took that very far. In Schopenhauer's Knowledge and Wisdom, which is extensive, but one of the simple ways to kind of simplify it is, he thinks that the highest pinnacle of achieving wisdom and human experience is learning to renounce, learning to say no to life. Whereas Nietzsche, inheriting his wisdom and inheriting some people before him, eventually flips it around and says, no, it's not to renounce, it's actually to affirm, it's to say yes. And I think in my life, through my teens up until about 26, um, almost the entirety of my life was about renouncing, was saying no to what I actually wanted, which in retrospect was very unhealthy. From a Jungian perspective, it's almost like I said no to myself. I no longer had so in Jung's language, it would be a self. In Freud's terms, it would be an ego, but I didn't have a healthy one. I killed my ego. I thought I was supposed to kill my ego. And I do think there's lots of resonance and remnants of that in popular discourse on various spiritualities, which could be very misleading for somebody who's a teenager or in their early 20s, especially when you see a charismatic figure who's kind of promoting that stuff to you. Human beings, we come, if we look at the evolution, we have inanimate, we have plant, vegetative, we have animal, we have human. And human beings, I believe, contain and incorporate all those processes that came before. And one thing that we've somewhat forgotten is that we are animalistic in a sense, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's something vital and there's something healthy about the natural instincts of a human being. I think for a lot of my time in the Kabbalah Center, and for about 10 years since that, I've been trying to rediscover myself. A lot of it has actually just been about getting back in touch with my own natural instincts. I think shutting down the sex drive, as unhealthily as I did, and other things that I did, they really cut me off from my own sensation, my own feeling. And once again, there's a big distinction between having knowledge and having intuition, having the ability to sense and feel, and having the ability to think. And a lot of the times, and this is something Jung noticed, a lot of the times people are not incorporating all of those inside of themselves simultaneously. They'll be lopsided where they're overly thinking, but they're not feeling. There'll be so much feeling, but they haven't cultivated thinking. What cosmic psychology is about is eventually one of the subfields, it's called psychological ambidexterity, is about learning how to enhance and cultivate your thinking and your feeling and unify them, even though they appear to be irreconcilable. So, anyway,
Wow.
yeah.